And we're moving into Mean Mr. Mustard?
Right, so we've come from that whole... And then again they end with this pretty E6 chord. Then it just jumps right into Mean Mr. Mustard waves and love this melody, it's all over an E chord. And there's an example of a stretched out melody, and he doesn't repeat it. He doesn't go, Mean Mr. Mustard, na 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 na, shades in the dark, trying to shave paper. Da, 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 da. You know, he doesn't do that, and so many bands do. It's like, come on, change up. It's interesting. So he does. Da, 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 da. Great. Okay. I love you, John. That's really cool. Really cool melody. Just really cool. So we're in the key of E. Mean Mr. Mustard. Go to the 5 chord. B. Chromatically up to D. Now again, that theory I told you about, wandering majors, where does this D come in?
Yeah.
You know? And the chromatic move, you don't count those chords. In other words, they're just passing chords, so you don't really...
Okay.
They're just a way to climb up to D. Okay? So forget those, the C and the C sharp, not necessary to think about them. But the, again, my theory, if you took the... if you made E major, E minor, it would be the relative minor of the key of G major.
Okay.
Okay? So when we look at E major, we have a 1, 4, 5, E, A, B, and in G major we have G, C, D. So you'll notice that goes up to the D, which is from the key of G, back down to the B, right?
Okay.
And the B takes us home to E, but then he goes da da da. So we got a C going to B7.
Now, is it dumb question? Is this a mixing of keys?
Let me think about this. Yes, it is. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not just a mixing of modes. Well, could it be a mixing? It could be a mixing of modes too.
Okay.
Look at it this way: like E is our root, so we could use any mode, given that it has an E root.
Okay.
All right. And the chords thereof. Now that definitely, if I change my E major to an E minor, you know, common root E, the truth of the matter is we are switching keys because E minor does not belong to the key of E major.
Okay, right.
Totally not, you know. Most likely G or C, you know. So if we looked at, say, like an E minor mode, like, say, E Aeolian, right?
Okay.
E Aeolian, I have to think about this, is from the key of G major.
Okay.
All right. The Aeolian key is the relative minor key, basically.
Right.
Okay. So that's from relative minor of G major. So we have all the chords now from the key of G major that we can employ into this E-rooted situation.
Okay.
Now look at it like this. Like if you took a chord family template and you wrote out 7 of them, the 7th one won't count, but just for the sake of completion. You put an E on the 1, that's going to be major. Then you write out all the chords for the key of E major.
Right.
Then you put an E on the 2, that's going to be E minor, because the 2 is minor.
Right.
Right? So then we go back a step to find out what key is E minor a whole step from, the key of D major.
Okay.
Then you can put an E on the 3 chord. All right?
Okay.
That will give us the key of C major, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Then you put an E on the 4 chord. That has to be major because it's 4. So
Okay.
then E as a 4 is the key of B major. So on and so forth. You could follow all these steps. And then you've drawn out all these chord templates. And then you, just like in Wonderland, it's like, okay, what do I pick and choose from? You know? But the real trick is, like, if you're going to choose a mode, use a couple of chords from the mode. Don't just pick one, because it might sound a little jarring,
Okay.
depending on the type of chord.
Okay.
You know, but if you move it around, it'll work.
All right.
You know? And this was this kind of thing that I'm just explaining now is something that the Beatles, of course, never consciously sat down and said, okay, let's go through the 7 modes and put the E root on, you know. They would never do that. It's all instinct, and that's the most remarkable, one of the most remarkable things about them is, and that's one of the hopeful things, too, is that music theory, perhaps, is living inside of all of us. You know, we have the 7 notes, we have the 7 chakras from the Hindu tradition.
Seven Pillars of Wisdom.
What's that?
7 Pillars of Wisdom.
7 Pillars
T.E.
of Wisdom.
Lawrence.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, yeah, the number 7 is a magic number,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, another idea I had was, you know, Pythagoras got the 7 notes of the scale by using a monochord and plucking on it, getting the harmonics, and then laying out the notes.
Oh, okay.
Now the thing is this: I have a theory. Like if you took a log and cut it into different sized mini logs, you'd have an instrument, bum 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 bum, like gamelan music or whatever.
Sure.
So how is a log producing a tone? It made me begin to think that everything, every object in the physical universe contains the 7 tones,
Oh, yeah? Okay.
including a human being. So that means that somewhere inside of us is that music theory. Somewhere inside of us it lives.
Okay.
I had a friend who was a student, actually, who was an acoustical scientist, an acoustical engineer.
Is that the guy that tuned his guitar just from playing the whole...
Yeah. He wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
He'd just go.
Right.
I do that sometimes, but the problem with the third and between the G and B is, you know, problematic. But yeah, he told me that the human brain has a part of it that is associated with just the function of processing music.
Huh. Okay.
And he said this goes back to Neanderthal times, before music was developed, you know, like they were banging on rocks and stuff. So it makes you wonder, why is there, like if we have language as a section of the brain and kinesthetic motion through space as a section of the brain and mathematics as a section of the brain, all those things can be reasoned out in terms of evolution, like why we would need those things, but why music? It's a very interesting little, you know, notion.
Well, it could be. It could just sort of make the arts all that more important.
Well, I agree, and I wish musicians were taken a little bit more seriously by society at large. I mean, you know, the world would stop if music stopped. I'm telling you, man. If there was no music, the world would die.
Well, a lot of that is sort of a societal thing where it's looked at as a, sort of an extra, a luxury.
A perk of society.
And, you know, not really doing anything, you know. And also, you know, the lazy peckerheads that masquerade as musicians.
Now, you know, I joke, like I'm not shy about telling you that I am totally biased against DJs and DJism. Sorry, guys. I really am. First of all, they took work away from real musicians who have worked at perfecting the art of what they do on an instrument. They've stolen that work from us, and therefore, like most musicians are really, really poor right now. You know, a lot of them, if they're not ensconced in the industry, you know. So yeah, I forgot what my point was about that.
Well, just it was. I think it was a sad day when the Berklee School of Music had decided to have a DJ program, like 3 years ago.
What is that? You know, come on.
And it's like, and you know, who was the head at the time? In fact, I think it's the vibraphonist was the head of the college.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
He was great, too.
And he's terrific.
There was a little crew there, the top dogs that were in the faculty. Yeah, like Pat Metheny was there.
Yeah,
I forget the guy's name. Steve Swallow, for some reason, comes to mind.
No, it's not. That's not him. I've got albums by the guy. But at any rate, I mean, that sort of went, oh, please, you know.
Now, the thing about it, I don't want to be totally prejudiced, because what they're doing is it's like being an artist, and your art is collage, and so you cut pictures out of magazines and glue them onto a canvas and make art from that. And I've seen beautiful stuff. There is, you know, really good stuff that DJs do, you know. It's just that my fantasy is that if we ever get a big, like, solar flare and there's an EMP blast that takes out all the electricity, people are going to love us musicians, man. They'll be sitting by campfires and I'll come over with a guitar. You check out how many groupies I have then.
There you are. You're the local Bernstein.
Yeah, suddenly they don't want to marry a lawyer. Suddenly they want to marry the musician.
Well, listen, I think we might be.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah, okay.
and then we'll download it.